is Tesla an exception to the rule or the only exception, or are there more exceptions, and just how should we, as a young startup founders, take the message?
So there's a lot in that question. So I'll start by saying that I'm not sure that I would categorize Tesla as a small organization or startup. But what I would say is that we do engage with Tesla as a matter of course. I know that's not the core of your question now. In terms of kind of ESG disclosures, you know, we certainly, one of the reasons that we are supportive of some required disclosures, if you will, from a regulatory perspective, is that it actually will reduce some of the noise, if you will, and some of those expectations, we think. We did a study 2 years ago of one insurance company that we were engaging with. They had over 100 requests for information from third-party assessors, and they were trying to understand what they needed to disclose because they didn't have the internal resources to satisfy all of that, right? So that was one of the reasons that a few years ago that BlackRock said the disclosure frameworks of TCFD and SASB as a component of that in terms of the metrics and target piece. We actually said that we endorse those and we support those to provide a little bit of clarity. But the core of your question isn't about necessarily that, it is how young companies really should comport themselves and kind of think about it, given the impressions, if you will. It's an interesting question because one of the things over the past 3 years that has started to happen is some of the investment banks that we've partnered with have started to ask us to have meetings with private companies to help them, and startup companies, to help them understand what expectations are and what the landscape is like, so that they can start to incorporate that in an early stage until they're thinking about the planning of the company. So I would say that you don't necessarily, this is something that we encounter with some smaller companies, for example, right? They want to disclose, like TCFD or SASB, but they don't have the internal resources. In many instances, the board has to approve it, and then that could be literally a 2-year journey in terms of them kind of getting everything kind of lined up internally in the systems, et cetera, so they can actually report out. What we ask them to do is to start the journey and to communicate to the investment community what they're doing and where they are. There is no requirement that everyone has to do everything today. I think most investors are interested in understanding how companies and boards are thinking about these issues, and the disclosures is important, but I certainly think that there's a component of recognizing that this is a very shifting landscape.